the seat that changed everything. There was a subtle chill in the air as the boarding process began for Flight 781 to New York. The cabin was humming with the low murmur of first-class passengers settling into their oversized seats, sipping champagne and pulling tablets from leather briefcases. Among them, a man named Daniel Hayes quietly took his place in Seat 2A. He was dressed modestly in a dark cashmere sweater, jeans, and understated loafers. His carry-on was a sleek black leather bag that he tucked neatly beneath the seat in front of him. Daniel had specifically selected this seat. It offered extra legroom, perfect for someone who needed to stretch out and continue reviewing the keynote speech he was scheduled to deliver at the Global Tech and Ethics Summit. This wasn't just any speech. It was the kind of address that could shift public policy. It was personal. He had boarded early, as Platinum Tier members often do. As he powered on his tablet, a woman entered the cabin with sharp heels and sharper eyes. Her name was Judith Winslow, dressed in a crisp white designer suit, her silk scarf knotted tightly at her neck. The moment she stepped into the aisle and spotted Daniel in 2A, her lips tightened. She adjusted her posture and marched toward the flight attendant. Jessica Langston, a seasoned flight attendant for Skybridge Airlines, met Judith with a smile that was part habit, part obligation. They exchanged polite greetings. Judith was a regular on this route, after all. Then, Judith gestured to Seat 2A. "There seems to be a mistake," she said with clipped diction. "That's my seat." Jessica turned toward Daniel, her expression quickly shifting from routine cheerfulness to manufactured concern. She approached him with a practiced calm. "Excuse me, sir," she began. "We may need you to change seats. This one is typically reserved for our long-time Platinum members." Daniel looked up, blinking. "I am a Platinum member," he said, pulling his wallet from his coat and showing his card. "And this is my assigned seat. I booked it weeks ago." Jessica hesitated, then pointed to Judith. "This passenger flies with us often and usually sits here. It's her preferred seat." The implication was unmistakable. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. "With all due respect, preferred isn't the same as reserved. This is the seat I paid for." Jessica smiled tightly. "Yes, but perhaps we could relocate you to a different seat, sir, for the comfort of all parties involved." Judith hovered nearby, checking her watch dramatically. "I always sit there," she said under her breath, though loudly enough for others to hear. "It's practically mine." Nearby passengers glanced over. One man raised an eyebrow. Another woman paused mid-email on her tablet. Tension rippled silently through the cabin. Daniel remained composed. "I'm not moving. I selected this seat for a reason." Jessica walked away without another word, her shoulders rigid. What neither she nor Judith realized was that Daniel Hayes wasn't just a passenger. He was the founder and CEO of Ardent a $3 billion tech company that specialized in eliminating algorithmic bias in customer service systems. Ironically, Skybridge Airlines had been in quiet talks with Ardent for months, desperate for a digital overhaul. Their outdated systems were hemorrhaging customer loyalty, and a partnership with Ardent could have revolutionized their entire operation. Unaware of the significance of the man sitting calmly in 2A, the cabin crew escalated the situation. Moments later, a man in a dark blazer and authority in his gait approached. His name was Travis Milton, the cabin supervisor. He crouched slightly near Daniel's seat. "Sir, we're going to need you to move," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. "We have a VIP who needs that seat." Daniel looked up again. "I'm also a VIP. Here's my card. Here's my boarding pass. This is my seat." Travis's eyes narrowed. "Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be." At this point, multiple passengers were watching. Phones were discreetly raised. One young woman across the aisle began recording. Judith stood tall in the aisle, arms crossed. "I have a meeting right after landing. This is unacceptable." Another passenger whispered, "He doesn't even look like someone who can afford first class." Travis leaned in close, voice dropping. "You can do this the easy way or the hard way." Daniel remained unbothered. "I'm not moving." Jessica returned, and with a flick of her fingers, motioned for the captain. Captain Wallace Brandt entered the cabin minutes later, his presence bringing a hush over the rows of leather seats. The situation was now an official matter. Jessica and Travis flanked him as he addressed Daniel. "Sir," he said firmly, "the crew has discretion over seat assignments. We're asking you to relocate." Daniel didn't raise his voice. "Captain, I have a confirmed ticket, Platinum status, and I selected this seat specifically for a medical condition that requires legroom. I'm not moving." "Final warning," the captain said. "If you do not comply, we'll be forced to remove you." That was when Daniel pressed record on his phone. I want to document it, he said calmly, that I'm being removed for sitting in a seat I legally purchased. Seconds later, airport security boarded. The young woman filming now had her phone angled clearly at the scene. 2 officers walked Daniel off the aircraft. He made no scene, no complaint. He gathered his belongings with calm precision and followed them down the aisle. The cabin was silent. Judith Winslow said in 2A moments later, her expression one of victory. Jessica brought her a glass of champagne. Travis whispered, that was handled. What they didn't know was that their actions were about to cost them everything. Within an hour, the video hit 1 million views online. By noon, it had hit 6. Daniel Hayes' identity was confirmed by journalists before Skybridge could issue a generic PR statement. Not only was he a billionaire tech CEO, but he also owned 22% of Skybridge stock through silent acquisition. By the time the Skybridge CEO, Leonard Vance, learned what had happened, it was too late. You removed Daniel Hayes? He asked his PR chief in horror. Yes, she replied, pale. It's all over the news. He's the reason we've been surviving this quarter. Vance called an emergency board meeting. Stock prices had dropped 11% in 4 hours. The video had made national headlines. Celebrities had shared it. Activists had condemned it. Back at the airport, Daniel sat in a private lounge, surrounded by his team. His COO, his lawyers, and communications advisors were drafting an immediate legal strategy. I want a full internal audit of Skybridge's policies, he said calmly. And notify the board. I'm calling an emergency shareholder vote. Meanwhile, Jessica, Travis, and Captain Brandt were summoned by HR. Their terminations were swift. No discussions. The evidence was irrefutable. Money had exchanged hands. They had humiliated a man with full rights to be where he was. They left the building escorted by security, just as Daniel had been. But it didn't end there. Skybridge's board voted unanimously to place CEO Leonard Vance on probation and launched a sweeping corporate overhaul. Under intense public pressure, they handed full operational oversight of culture reform to Ardencore. Daniel Hayes wasn't interested in revenge. He wanted systemic change. He created a policy reform panel, rewrote employee handbooks, implemented mandatory bias training, and suspended all flights for 48 hours to complete onboarding for the new standards. Skybridge became the first airline in the world to fully overhaul its customer interaction systems using Ardencore's bias filtration algorithms. 6 months later, the company posted its highest satisfaction scores in decades. Minority passengers reported equitable treatment for the first time in company surveys. Daniel rejoined the board, reluctantly. He accepted an apology, not because it was deserved, but because the work needed to move forward. He also launched the Redress Program, a rehabilitation initiative offering second chances to employees involved in public discrimination incidents, including Jessica and Travis. Not because they earned forgiveness, but because real change means education, not erasure. Judith Winslow? She was banned for life from Skybridge. Her name became synonymous with entitlement. But even she received an offer, an anonymous seat at a humility workshop. Whether she accepted it was her choice. The flight that tried to push Daniel Hayes out would become the very one that changed how the skies operated. Because sometimes, justice boards first class too. As the days passed after the incident, the public outrage did not die down, it intensified. Protesters appeared outside Skybridge terminals holding signs that read, "Seats aren't skin-toned," and "First class isn't just for the familiar faces." Think pieces flooded the internet. Legal analysts dissected the event on national television. Late-night hosts referenced it with biting satire. Hashtags like #FlyingWhileBlack and #Seat2A trended for over a week. Daniel Hayes remained silent. He didn't post, didn't grant interviews. He let the world speak. Until he didn't. 2 weeks later, Skybridge Airlines announced they would be holding a press conference to introduce a sweeping reform plan, with a special guest to join. Speculation erupted online. When the day came, the room was packed. Dozens of cameras. Live feeds. Airline executives in tailored suits sat nervously in the front row. A large screen behind the podium displayed a single image, Seat 2A. Then, Daniel Hayes walked in. He wore the same navy blue sweater from the flight, as if to say, "You tried to remove me in this. I return in this." His presence alone silenced the room. He stood behind the podium, looked out at the sea of faces, and began, not with blame, but with a story. I was 11 the first time someone told me I didn't belong. I was building a code game at school, and the teacher told me I must have copied it, because kids like me don't build things like that. 30 years later, I was told again, this time at 30,000 feet. The difference? I recorded it. But what about those who didn't? He paused, scanning the room. You see, this story isn't about me sitting in 2A. It's about every child who learns early that they need to prove their worth twice just to be treated as human once. It's about every worker who watches the undeserving get promoted while they stay invisible. It's about systems that disguise bias as policy. He laid out a 5-point transformation initiative that went far beyond corporate PR. A complete rebranding of first-class seating structure, not by preferred passengers, but a transparent system of reservation only. No subjective discretion. Body cam-style lapel cameras for flight leads during all boarding and dispute resolutions to protect both passengers and staff. The Ethical Sky Task Force, co-led by Arden Corps, to audit every complaint involving discrimination over the past 5 years, with compensation offers for proven cases. A national coalition of transportation companies committing to anti-bias AI integration. The Hayes Scholarship Fund, seeded by $15 million of Skybridge's annual profits, aimed at supporting underrepresented youth in aviation and engineering. The room broke into applause. Not polite applause, genuine, thunderous. Some clapped for the future. Some clapped for their children. And some clapped because for the first time, they saw a path forward that didn't rely on shame or silence. But it didn't end there. The FAA opened a federal investigation into Skybridge's previous complaints. Thousands of passengers submitted footage and testimonies. What began as a single injustice became the catalyst for a civil aviation reckoning. Judith Winslow, now infamous, appeared in a televised interview months later, looking hollowed out. I used to think privilege was just being lucky. I didn't realize it was having the power to displace someone and assuming the world would side with you. She paused, tearful. I was wrong. She later withdrew from public life. No public redemption arc. Just silence. Back inside Skybridge, the company transformed. Passenger ratings soared. Not because they changed slogans, but because they changed systems. In every terminal now stood a digital kiosk called the Equity Pod, allowing passengers to report mistreatment, ask for help, or simply provide feedback. And they were actually listened to. But perhaps the most powerful moment came a year after the incident. Skybridge's newest aircraft, the one meant for its redesigned Elite International line, was ready to launch. Daniel Hayes was invited to christen it. The name etched in gold across the fuselage? The 2A. When asked why he chose that name, Daniel smiled softly. Because one seat changed everything. And now, it will carry people forward. He didn't ask for his face to be painted on the side of the plane. He didn't demand loyalty. He only asked for justice and helped build a system where no one else would be quietly erased again. And when he boarded the plane for its inaugural flight, not as a shareholder, not as a tech giant, but just a man with a ticket, he walked to his seat. Seat 2A. No one questioned him this time. Because now, the system knew exactly who belonged there. Everyone.